The heretic's fork was a device that embodied an insidious form of cruelty, one that was both physically painful and mentally torturous. Unlike many instruments of medieval punishment that sought to break the body outright, the heretic's fork focused on creating a sustained, unyielding torment that wore down the victim's will over time. Designed with a cruel precision, it consisted of a forked metal device with two sharp prongs, which were placed under the chin and pressed against the chest. The prongs were meant to dig into the victim's flesh, creating constant pain, while simultaneously restricting their ability to speak, move, or rest. The pain was not a quick burst of agony. It was a slow, nagging discomfort that persisted for hours, days, or even longer, ensuring that the victim was trapped in a state of unrelenting suffering. The physical pain caused by the prongs was severe, but it was the combination of discomfort and immobility that made the heretic's fork especially terrifying. The victim was forced to remain upright and in a rigid position, as any movement would aggravate the prongs pressing into their flesh. The victim could not lie down to sleep or find any comfortable position. They were instead forced to endure the constant pressure, their body locked in place. The agony was not just a sharp stab of pain, but a persistent, gnawing discomfort that only intensified as time wore on. But the true horror of the heretic's fork lay not only in the physical pain it inflicted. The device was designed to force the victim into a position of complete vulnerability and helplessness. The victim could not speak or cry out in the same way they could in other forms of torture. The device restricted their ability to vocalize, leaving them to suffer in silence, their screams stifled by the position the device forced them into. The psychological effect of this silence was devastating. The victim could feel the oppressive weight of their own helplessness, knowing that they were at the mercy of their tormentors, unable to resist or escape. This silence added an element of mental distress that intensified the physical pain. Moreover, the heretic's fork kept the victim's mind trapped in a state of constant awareness of their own vulnerability. The discomfort caused by the prongs digging into the flesh created an unbearable sense of restriction, but the mental toll was just as great. The victim knew that they could not escape, that they could not move, and that they had no choice but to endure. The unyielding nature of the device trapped the victim's mind in a cycle of pain and helplessness, creating a sense of despair that was as brutal as the physical torture itself. The psychological torment of the heretic's fork was compounded by the victim's inability to rest. In many cases, the device was left in place for days, sometimes longer, with no relief. The victim was forced to remain awake, their body and mind constantly under siege. The lack of rest, combined with the unrelenting pressure, would eventually wear down the victim's strength and resolve. What began as a physical ordeal transformed into a mental one, as the victim's mind became consumed with the desire for release that might never come. What made the heretic's fork especially horrifying was its ability to keep the victim in a state of constant awareness of their own suffering. It was not a quick, dramatic form of torture that ended with a single blow, but a prolonged, methodical torment that stretched time into an agonizing eternity. Each moment felt like a small eternity, as the victim remained trapped in a position that denied them any comfort or respite. The constant pressure and the psychological toll of being immobilized, unable to cry out or escape, created a sense of utter vulnerability that broke down the victim's resolve. The heretic's fork was not just a tool of physical pain, it was an instrument of complete control over the body and mind. It kept the victim in a state of constant, gnawing suffering, forcing them to endure both the physical agony of the prongs and the mental torment of knowing that they had no escape. This combination of physical and psychological cruelty made the heretic's fork one of the most insidious and terrifying devices of medieval punishment. It was designed to break the victim's spirit as much as their body, ensuring that their suffering was as prolonged and complete as possible. The heretic's fork was not only a tool of physical agony, it was designed with one purpose in mind: control. Unlike other forms of punishment that aimed for a quick end or a dramatic spectacle, the heretic's fork was a device of prolonged submission. The victim's body was forced into a state of immobility, their position dictated by the cold metal prongs that pierced the skin beneath their chin. The body was confined, unable to shift, unable to find relief, and unable to escape the oppressive pressure that the device inflicted. This made the heretic's fork an extraordinary tool for ensuring that the victim remained in a state of complete helplessness. The device was designed to place the victim in a rigid, uncomfortable position. The prongs of the fork were inserted into the throat and chest, ensuring that the victim could not move their head or body without causing unbearable pain. Unlike other forms of torture, which might involve more immediate violence, the heretic's fork used discomfort and restriction as a form of psychological and physical control. It forced the victim into a position of submission, with no ability to escape, resist, or fight back. The mere act of attempting to move was enough to cause excruciating pain, leaving the victim immobilized and at the mercy of the torturer's will. What made the heretic's fork so insidious was its ability to maintain complete control over the victim's actions. The device ensured that they could not sleep, they could not eat, and they could not speak clearly. The prongs digging into their flesh created an unbearable continuous pressure, preventing the victim from finding any comfort. The victim was left with nothing but the sensation of constant discomfort and the knowledge that they were powerless to alter their situation. This relentless force was as much about breaking the victim's mind as it was about torturing their body. In a sense, the heretic's fork acted as a metaphor for the kind of power the authorities wielded over their victims. The device was not designed to kill quickly or to destroy the body instantly. Instead, it operated on the principle of prolonged discomfort, which wore down the victim's will to resist. The victim was kept alive, but in a state of total submission, forced to endure the agony of the device without the mercy of an end. The use of the heretic's fork signified not just physical domination, but the psychological dominance of the authority that wielded it. The device forced the victim into a position of extreme vulnerability. Not only were they physically immobilized, but they were mentally and emotionally subjugated. The pain of the device was unrelenting, and with no ability to speak, the victim's voice was silenced. The victim was left powerless, unable to plead for mercy, unable to protest, and unable to escape their fate. This silence and powerlessness were key components of the heretic's fork's control. It stripped away the victim's dignity, turning them into an object of suffering, while simultaneously breaking their ability to resist. The victim could only endure the pain, left to succumb to the pressure as their body and mind were slowly worn down. The psychological aspect of the heretic's fork was as significant as its physical impact. The inability to speak, to move, or to act in any meaningful way forced the victim into a state of total submission. They were no longer able to challenge their tormentors or to resist their fate. The continuous pressure from the prongs was both a physical sensation and a mental force, keeping the victim constantly aware of their helplessness. This unrelenting submission was designed to break the spirit, forcing the victim to accept their fate and submit to the authority that controlled their suffering. In many ways, the heretic's fork was a reflection of the authoritarian regimes that used it. The device's function was not to simply destroy, it was to dominate. It was about making the victim suffer while maintaining control over their every action and every thought. The torturer had complete power over the victim's fate, and the victim had no recourse. Their suffering was designed to be both endless and powerless. The device's role was not just to inflict pain, it was to strip away the victim's autonomy and to make them submit entirely. This theme of submission and control was reinforced by the psychological toll the heretic's fork took on its victim. The mind, just as much as the body, was subjugated by the device. The victim's thoughts, their desire to resist, their need for escape, all of these were crushed by the unyielding pressure of the prongs. The victim could not even cry out in their agony, as the very act of trying to speak or move would only exacerbate their suffering. This loss of control, this complete surrender to the device, became the ultimate form of submission, reinforcing the oppressive power of the authorities who wielded it. Thus, the heretic's fork was more than just a tool of torture. It was an instrument of control, forcing the victim into submission, ensuring that they would endure not just the physical pain, but the psychological torment of being utterly dominated. It was a chilling reminder that power could be exercised not only through violence, but through the quiet, methodical subjugation of both body and mind. The heretic's fork was not a tool designed for swift execution, rather, it was created to extend the victim's suffering for as long as possible. Unlike methods of torture that sought a quick, decisive end, the heretic's fork was a tool that ensured the victim endured a prolonged, agonizing existence. The device did not seek to kill the victim immediately, but to leave them in a state of constant discomfort, their body immobilized and their throat constricted, making every breath a painful reminder of their fate. This extended suffering was as much a part of the punishment as the pain it caused. The most disturbing aspect of the heretic's fork was its ability to keep the victim alive while still inflicting excruciating torment. The prongs pressed into the throat and chest, digging into the flesh, forcing the victim to remain upright and unable to move. The pressure from the device was constant, and the victim's body had no choice but to endure it. They could not sleep, as the device made it impossible to relax. They could not eat or drink properly, as the prongs interfered with their ability to swallow. The sensation of being unable to find relief from the device created a mental anguish that was just as brutal as the physical pain. The victim's agony did not come to an end after a few moments or hours. It stretched on, sometimes for days, in a state of continuous torment. What made this form of torture particularly horrifying was its ability to prolong the victim's suffering without allowing them any means of escape. The prongs of the heretic's fork were carefully designed to cause pain without killing the victim outright. It wasn't a quick death by a sharp blade or a violent blow to the head. It was a slow, grinding process where every moment felt like an eternity. The victim's body would eventually break down under the strain. Muscles would become fatigued from the constant tension, and exhaustion would begin to take its toll on the mind. But even as the victim's strength faded, they would remain trapped in the device, their fate sealed but their death still a distant possibility. The torment inflicted by the heretic's fork was not simply a matter of physical discomfort. It was a battle against time. The device ensured that every second of the victim's existence was filled with pain and helplessness. The victim could not move, could not escape, and could not find solace in sleep. Their world was reduced to a small space, a space where every breath and every movement was a reminder of their position. Helpless, trapped, and suffering, the victim's mind, too, would begin to erode under the strain. What began as a fight for physical survival would eventually become a struggle for mental endurance, as the victim's thoughts became consumed by the constant awareness of their pain. This prolonged suffering was a central aspect of the heretic's fork's design. The device was not only a form of torture, it was a method of control. The victim was not allowed the mercy of death, or the release of unconsciousness. They were kept alive to endure the pain, to be worn down both physically and mentally. The idea was not just to break the body, but to break the spirit, to force the victim to face their mortality without the relief of death. The device kept them alive, making each moment of suffering feel like an eternity. It was not just about inflicting pain. It was about creating an experience that could not be escaped, a cycle of torment that the victim would never be able to end. This slow, agonizing process was not only a means of punishment, it was a tool for psychological domination. The victim was forced into a state of continuous discomfort, where the only certainty was the pain. The inability to move, to speak, to rest, or to find any kind of relief transformed the victim into a broken shell of a person. They were not just physically hurt, they were mentally shattered, reduced to a state of complete submission. The constant pressure from the heretic's fork created a situation where there was no escape, no respite, and no hope. This despair was an essential part of the device's power. It was not just about causing immediate harm. It was about stripping the victim of their dignity, their hope, and their ability to fight back. For those who survived the ordeal, the effects of the heretic's fork were long-lasting. The physical scars left by the prongs might heal, but the mental scars would remain. Survivors would often report feeling as though they could never fully escape the memories of their suffering. The constant pressure, the inability to move, the psychological toll of being trapped in such a device left an indelible mark on the victim's mind. The heretic's fork did not just destroy the body, it destroyed the will to resist, the will to fight, and the very will to live. In many ways, the heretic's fork was designed to ensure that the victim's suffering became a part of their identity. They could not escape it, could not avoid it, and could not outrun it. The torment was a slow, ongoing process, stretching time itself into an eternal agony. And this was what made the heretic's fork so deeply disturbing. It was not just a device of death. It was a device of endless suffering. It ensured that its victims would know that their torment was not quick but drawn out, relentless and all-encompassing. The heretic's fork was a tool crafted in the heart of religious persecution, a device designed not only to punish but to symbolize the terrifying consequences of challenging the religious authority of the time. It was used most prominently during the Inquisition, a period marked by an unyielding drive to root out heresy and force conformity. The tool was more than just an instrument of pain. It was a deliberate and calculated method of silencing dissent and asserting control over both the body and the mind of those who dared question or deviate from the accepted religious beliefs. At its core, the heretic's fork was a manifestation of the period's religious intolerance, serving as a stark reminder of the brutal measures taken to maintain orthodoxy. During the Inquisition, heretics, those who were accused of defying the Catholic Church's teachings, were seen as a threat not only to religious authority, but to the very fabric of society. Heresy was not just a theological disagreement, it was an act of rebellion against the divine order, and those who were branded as heretics were treated as enemies of the Church, deserving of the harshest punishment. The heretic's fork was a tool created specifically to punish these individuals, to force them to conform to the religious beliefs that the Church decreed as absolute. When placed on a victim, the heretic's fork made clear the power the Church held over the body. The prongs dug into the victim's throat and chest, forcing them into a rigid, uncomfortable position. This physical suffering was meant to symbolize the torment that awaited those who defied the sacred teachings of the Church. The device acted as a constant reminder that the will of the Church was unchallenged and that any dissent would be met with a form of punishment that transcended the physical. It was an act of religious control, asserting that belief was not a matter of choice but of obedience. and any deviation from the accepted truth would be met with suffering. The heretic's fork's design also reflected the idea of spiritual submission. By forcing the victim into a position where they could neither speak nor move freely, it mirrored the enforced submission of the mind to the dictates of the church. The victim's thoughts, their ability to protest or even articulate their beliefs, were stifled. The device turned the human body into a tool of submission, ensuring that the victim's mind would be trapped in a state of silence, helplessness, and suffering. The church did not just want the victim's compliance, it wanted their complete submission, physically, mentally, and spiritually. The heretic's fork was a literal embodiment of this demand for total control. This use of torture as a tool for religious conformity was not only about punishing individuals, it was about sending a broader message to the population. The very presence of the heretic's fork in society was a warning to those who might be tempted to question the church's authority. It was not enough to punish the heretic. The church wanted to use their suffering as a public spectacle to reinforce the idea that dissent could never be tolerated. The pain inflicted by the heretic's fork was meant to remind others of the price of defying religious orthodoxy. The device also served as a demonstration of the church's divine authority by placing someone in a position of such extreme physical discomfort. The church symbolically asserted that it had the power to control not just the spiritual lives of its followers, but their very bodies. The victim's struggle and suffering were proof of the church's power to enforce its will, even in the most intimate aspects of the human experience. The heretic's fork wasn't just a punishment for defying a set of beliefs. It was an assertion of the church's dominance, its ability to make believers submit to its will, even when that submission meant enduring pain and suffering. The heretic's fork was a tool of religious violence, used to coerce and subjugate those who dared to challenge the church's authority. It symbolized the brutal intolerance that defined much of the Inquisition era, where questioning religious dogma was not just seen as a sin, but as an act of rebellion that could lead to violent retribution. The device stood as a grim reminder that, in a world ruled by religious absolutism, the price of defiance was often a slow, agonizing death. While the heretic's fork is no longer in use today, its legacy as a symbol of religious intolerance and the extremes to which the church once went to preserve its power endures. It reminds us of a time when belief was not a private matter, but a subject of control and punishment. The heretic's fork continues to represent the dark side of religious authority, where those who dared to think differently or question the sacred tenets were met with not just spiritual condemnation, but physical suffering. It is a haunting reminder of the lengths to which systems of power will go to enforce their doctrines, and of the suffering endured by those who stood against them. The heretic's fork, though, a relic of a darker past, has left a chilling legacy that resonates far beyond the medieval period. Its use during the Inquisition, where it was employed as a tool of both physical pain and psychological control, has ensured that it remains a symbol of terror, oppression, and the abuse of power. The enduring impact of the heretic's fork lies not only in the brutal suffering it inflicted, but in the fear it instilled in those who witnessed it, and those who knew they might one day become its victims. The legacy of this device is not just one of historical cruelty, it is a reminder of the terrifying power of control, both physical and mental, when wielded by those in power. The heretic's fork was a tool used to break not only the body but the spirit. For those who found themselves subjected to it, the device stripped away their dignity, their autonomy, and their ability to resist. The slow, unyielding pressure of the prongs forced the victim into a state of complete submission. They could not move, they could not speak, they could not escape. This form of control was a weapon in itself, designed to force individuals into complete helplessness, ensuring that they were not only physically broken, but mentally subjugated. What made the Heretic's fork so terrifying was the combination of its physical torment and its psychological impact. The victims knew that they were being watched, perhaps by inquisitors, perhaps by their peers, but always by a society that viewed dissent with suspicion. The device ensured that their suffering was not just physical, it was also social. The device was a tool of public humiliation, an instrument of control that forced its victim to be seen as both a criminal and an object of pity. The mental anguish caused by this constant subjugation was just as powerful as the physical pain. The Heretic's fork was also an instrument of fear. Its very presence was a reminder that defying religious or political authority could lead to unimaginable suffering. It was used not only to punish heretics, but to warn others of the consequences of questioning the status quo. The terror it instilled was not just in the device itself, but in the knowledge that anyone could be subjected to it. Its use was a tool for maintaining control, ensuring that those who lived under the shadow of the Inquisition or other authoritarian regimes were constantly aware of the consequences of disobedience. Even those who were not directly affected by the Heretic's fork felt its legacy. It became part of the larger system of fear that permeated societies under the control of religious or political authorities. The mere thought that anyone could be forced into the device, subjected to its prolonged torture, was enough to keep individuals in line. It worked not only through the visible suffering of its victims, but also through the constant, unspoken threat that anyone could be next. This fear was a powerful tool of control, one that ensured compliance and obedience. The legacy of the Heretic's fork extends beyond its immediate historical use. While it may no longer be in practice, the memory of its horror continues to influence how we view systems of power and control. It serves as a reminder of the lengths to which authorities will go to maintain order and silence opposition. The fear it instilled was not just a momentary terror. It was a long-lasting fear that seeped into the collective psyche of those living under oppressive regimes. The Heretic's fork was not just about inflicting pain. It was about maintaining absolute control, ensuring that the victim and everyone else knew that resistance was futile. In the modern world, where the idea of torture and abuse of power continues to be a global issue, the legacy of the Heretic's fork reminds us of the importance of protecting individual freedoms and standing against systems of control that seek to silence dissent. It serves as a warning of the dangers that arise when authority is allowed to wield such unchecked power over the body and mind. The Heretic's fork was not just a tool of medieval punishment. It was a symbol of fear, oppression, and the lengths to which those in power will go to crush rebellion, not just through violence, but through the mental and emotional domination of the individual. The device's lingering legacy also challenges us to examine the ways in which fear continues to shape societies. In modern political contexts, we can still see echoes of the same strategies of control. The use of fear to suppress opposition, to silence dissent, and to maintain power. While the Heretic's fork itself may no longer be used, the fear and the methods of control that it represented continue to be relevant today. The device's legacy is a chilling reminder that the abuse of power does not always need to be visible or loud. Sometimes it can be the silent, unrelenting pressure that keeps individuals from speaking out, from resisting, and from breaking free.